Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, we are so excited to have Haley and Justin here from the Price of Avocado Toast. Welcome. Good morning. It's quite early where you two are.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. We're so excited to be here. Even if it's early morning, we're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Nice.
It's all relative. The only person who finds this early is you, Maggie.
Yeah, and I'm 3 hours later. Yes.
Right.
I just set an alarm. This was a big deal for a Saturday. Okay. Well, we're excited to have you here. We sometimes, we'll do more detailed intros for people, but lately we actually think people introduce themselves much better than we fumble our way through one. And so I think it's helpful to just kind of start by introducing the two of you a little bit about who you are. And I also like to think, like, if we were at a dinner party, and I was just meeting you, like, what would you tell me about yourself and how would you introduce the two of you?
Wow.
You do it. You're better. Do the elevator pitch.
Sure. Well, we are Justin and Haley Brownwoods. We're two educators that live out in California. And during the quarantine, we had too much wine one night and decided we wanted to start a podcast because we really like talking about finance with our friends. And we started to burn my brother out by talking too much straight to him about it. So we started our podcast, The Price of Avocado Toast, was it late June or early July?
Right on the cusp.
Yeah, it was like right in the split. I can't remember when exactly the first episode dropped. But we started in the summer of 2020 and we're still going strong with our podcast, The Price of Avocado Toast.
I think all the best decisions are made during periods of anxiety and isolation while intoxicated.
While drinking.
Yeah, absolutely. It was we like put it on her Instagram story, on her personal story, and it was like looking back at it, we were like, it's pretty clear we're intoxicated there. But a couple weeks later, we were like, hey, we should still do it when we were sober. So the sober decision won out.
Yep.
That's funny.
I signed up for a podcasting course to kind of help me do it because I had no idea how to start the podcast or get it all going. And that's when I was like, okay, this is real. But the decision was definitely made after some wine, but it was a good decision. I'm so happy we made that decision.
Yeah, I am too.
And the wine was good.
Well, I listen to your podcast frequently and love it. And I love your teasers. You do a great job of teasing episodes where I'm like, I've got to listen to this next episode. You'll tease it on social and I have to, so it works well.
Oh, good. I don't know if anything other than like the most recent house stuff has been like the most exciting. So if we're teasing it that well, that's awesome.
You'll tease you tease the Dave Ramsey one. And I was like, well, I want to know what you have, which we'll talk about later. But I was like, I don't know. We don't follow Dave Ramsey much. And the most I've heard about him is kind of through some other people's social accounts. But when you tease that one, I was like, I got to listen to this one too.
Oh, nice. Well, good job, honey. Haley gets to run the social media on that.
Yeah,
stuff,
she's doing great.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we like to start our episodes off with, before we get into what you're doing currently, is talking about how you were raised financially. So could you tell us a little bit about the lessons you were taught by your parents, what your lifestyle was like as kids?
This was in the pre-wine era of your life. Just
right.
Yeah, right? Yeah, the pre-wine. Do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I'll start with this one. We were basically not taught anything. We were both raised by single moms for the most of our lives, and it just was hard. So we come from just not having a lot of money, really seeing our parents suffer and wanting so much different and so much more than that. And that's kind of what got us started with, I don't even know, we weren't taught much. I can say that. And a lot of our lessons have really just been from us making mistakes, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. Just to give your listeners kind of a heads up, our podcast is all centered around the fact that I received a $600,000 inheritance or a wrongful death lawsuit from the passing of my grandma. And then it's kind of centered around how we blew it and how we're trying to crawl our way back into financial literacy. And a lot of that does stem with our early teachings from our parents. And, I bring this up fairly often with Haley because we've both experienced it, but for lack of a better word, poor people or people who are not super financially literate typically earmark their money before it's even in their pocket. And then when they get it, it's not like earmarked for the most healthy things. So it's not like I have a budget and it's earmarked for that. It's like, I know I'm going to get this money, so I'm going to spend it like this. And that was really the way that we were both taught things. So when we got a lot of money, it was like, well, we have that money, we might as well spend it. And so it was, this lifestyle inflation for a bunch of college kids that weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
And that's 100% from our upbringing. So it's something we're still coping with for sure. I mean, we love our parents, but they just, were put in difficult situations and we're trying to walk our way out of it.
And for me, because I didn't have much money growing up, when I got a job, I started working at like 14 and I just hustled to make as much money as I could just so I could spend it. Like immediately. There was no savings, but because they didn't teach us how to put money away and how to save for certain things. And so I would make a bunch of money and then just blow it immediately. I just go shopping. I didn't know anything else. And that we're still figuring out. Like that's exactly what we did with the giant inheritance. We got it and we blew it in 3 years.
So a couple things related to what you just said. First, I think it's so interesting what you said, and you kind of summarize it as we weren't taught anything, which we hear is an incredibly common theme. Everyone grew up in a different socioeconomic situation and reality, but whether they grew up with very little or very much, it often seems like most people are not talking, or at least in our generation, right? We're not talking to their kids about money, which is an interesting theme and something that I think, we're all changing, particularly with our own kids, I know. So I just think it's interesting that, regardless of how people grew up, the common theme is most people's parents did not talk about money much. And so you brought up the 600K. I love a good story. I think that is a very powerful and memorable story. It's certainly something I often think about with you two. I'd love for you to just kind of like, you teased it a little bit just a second ago, but like, tell us the story of how you received, not the details, obviously, but that you received this money and then what did you do with it? And what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's unfortunate, I think, because I didn't have the financial literacy beforehand, but we're trying to get our way out of it. So we're still wrapped up into the 600,000 in a particular way that I can explain. But basically the way that it worked was, I got a phone call. Obviously we knew my grandma was sick and we had to sign a bunch of documents for lawyers. But then eventually when she passed away and this lawsuit went through, I got a check. The first check was in like mid-January for like $60,000. And that was a lot of money to me then. And so I paid off some student loans and purchased a new vehicle that it was a Toyota RAV4. It's a great car. It wasn't, some flashy thing. I was like, oh, I'm making the right choice because this is a productive car and not a Mustang or something. And then in like March, I got a check for the other 540,000. And I mean, it's a little piece of paper, but it says 540,000 to Justin Brown on it. And it was terrifying. And I like text my siblings right away. Like, this is so insane. My father passed away when I was 17. So his inheritance basically went to his 3 heirs, which is me, my brother, and my sister. So we all got the same amount. And we were just like, what is going on? So, I mean, we did do some smart things. I started a Roth. Like I said, I purchased my car and paid off student loans. I paid off my mom's car. We bought the home we're in. But even that, like we didn't put all the money down. We live in California, and so it is expensive. But we could have afforded like a really nice condo and had it in our name to maybe now have like a rental property that we could use. But instead we didn't. And we blew through it on dumb stuff. We subsidized one of us staying home from work at any given point due to schooling. We spent it on ridiculous, trips out and just so much lifestyle inflation. So yeah, that's kind of where that 600,000 went. We sit sometimes and we're like, where did this go?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean, we bought the computer. So I'm kind of like, I can always look at this and be like, well, at least my Zoom classes with my students look good. But
yeah, there's certain things where I'm like, okay, I know we bought the computer. We bought my nice camera, but we look back all the time and it just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like you can't even quite add it all up. I mean,
Yeah,
I can
no.
tell that as you're going through it, you're kind of like, you know some things, but you're like, I don't even really know where it all went.
And it went so fast. I remember when we would just transfer $20,000-$30,000 from the savings account over to our checking account, like regularly. And it just went so fast. And it was terrifying how quickly it went. And then it was just gone. We had a really nice $30,000 wedding, and that was the end of the money. And we got married in 2018, September of 2018. So it was over the course of, January 2016, September 2018 is how fast it went. Yeah. Not even 3 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful example of something that I think is a misconception for many people, that if they just have more money or if they earn more money, they will start saving more money. Be like, well, once I get promoted, then I'll start saving money. And what your story is a good example of is like, no matter how much you have, our economy is set up to easily separate you from your money.
Yeah.
And so I think many people
our
would
economy
look at
and our habits, Mike. I think
exactly.
Both.
Yeah, both of them. And people would look at this 600,000 inheritance and be like, no, if I got that, I would definitely do all these saving things, but it just disappears. It's an incredible story.
Before you tell us what you learned about it, maybe you can't even talk about this, but what did your siblings do with the money? I didn't realize they all. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So my brother purchased a home as well. Bought a brand new truck. I think he started a Roth IRA as well, and
paid off some student loans. And then very similar. I haven't asked him because he kind of like doesn't like to talk money with us much anymore. And then my sister, she purchased a home. She was the smartest of the three.
I would say her.
Well, women are always the smartest. So.
Yeah, she absolutely is. She purchased a home with her family, and then she invested the rest of it into her business, which is now thriving in Oakland. She has a really good restaurant in Oakland, California. Unfortunately, she is going through a separation, so she's going to be working on a different project, but that business still helps her family because her wife still owns it, and so it still goes to their kiddos and stuff. But she was probably the smartest of the three of us, for
Definitely.
sure.
Yeah. Okay. So what learnings did you take out of that experience? This, now a few years later, I guess.
Yeah, I think just really what Mike said, no matter how much money you have, if you don't know how to handle it, you're not really going to move forward in life. Like we are still paying for our past because we screwed up so bad with that money. Like now we think all the things that we would have done if we had that money now, it would be substantially different. So I think people really just think the more money I have, I'll just be happy and everything will be good. But that's definitely not the case. And we learned to budget through all this because we definitely didn't have budget before this.
Yeah. For me, and I think you guys will probably resonate with this, it's just like fulfillment. Like there's things now that as we're starting to move or when we were starting to get back out of debt that I was selling on Facebook that I'm like, why did I buy this? Why did I want this? Why did I think that this held so much value in my world when I'm now like pushing it on Facebook to somebody who will come and grab it off my porch because I don't even want to meet them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's not a slight against humanity, but it's that's how little this thing means. They could come and steal it and not leave cash in my mailbox. And I'd be like, whatever, like, like that's how much this thing matters to me. And at some point I put such a value on it because I had money. That's like, why couldn't I just be happy with what I had?
On that note, because I was going to ask you about this later, but since you brought that up, are you happier now that you're, counting your pennies, so to say, like, budgeting, paying off debt, etc.? Or were you happier when you were mindlessly spending $600,000?
Can I jump in? Because this is so cool.
Yeah, you jump in.
Sweet. So, we both we loved to go out and stuff and do all that. And so it was cool spending that money. But now we just constantly talk about how life feels like it's just like lining up for us. Right. And we're always like, wow, like, look at this. This is going so right. This is going so right. And then I stop and think, I'm like, no, wait a minute. We're making active decisions that are putting our family in this position to actually win from this singular moment. And so I would totally say we're happier now. Like we still get to do the things we want to do. We would have gone out every single night of the week if we could. Now we sit down as a family every single night and have dinner together. Like what a blessing that we get to do that. We still have money in our budget to go and eat out, 1 or 2 times a month. So I would say we're happier now, for sure.
Yeah, like we like money. We enjoy spending money.
Yeah.
But now it's definitely more future filled. Like we're doing things for the future. I mean, we have made some serious sacrifices to get our shit together. It was so bad at one point. And not only did we blow all the money, we racked up almost $30,000 of credit card debt and $130,000 of student loans. It's not like we cash flowed all those things. So the money mistakes were so deep. And we are finally in a place where we're like, okay, we are so close to being free of all of this. It's just going to be so sweet when we're on the other side. I cannot wait to just be free of all of the debt because it has been a huge burden.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so telling what your answer was to that. And the reason I asked that is because I personally am happier when I'm spending less and enjoying the simple things in life, even when I could be doing, other things. And I think people often look at people like the way Mike and I live versus others, or the way many people that are trying to get out of debt live, and or that have just sort of had that aha moment in their life of what truly brings them happiness. They look at it and think like, oh, you're suffering, you're, having to give up things and not getting to enjoy your life and all of these things. But I actually think I'm happier I'm not comparing myself to someone else. I'm just saying, comparing myself to, like you two just did, to a situation when you were flush with cash, to a situation when you are trying to pay off debt, and somehow you're actually happier when you're, on this kind of, right path forward. So I think it's just a fascinating real life example and story that I think brings to life what really does create happiness.
You said 2 important things that made me realize, I think, Maggie, to your point about why we feel better about our lifestyle than other people think we do, is that you guys said there's a purpose to what you're doing now, and then you're also making active, intentional decisions. If you combine those things, I can see why that would make you much happier now than just then kind of letting your money spend itself based on your habits or what advertising you're seeing. And so I think that's an interesting framework for people to think about if they're considering making a lifestyle change and if they're going to be happier because of it.
Can I ask you guys, do you guys get that question fairly often? Because I mean, even just myself, when I first learned about the FIRE movement, I started to think, wow, like I wonder how they feel kind of living in that frugality. Like they must feel like a miser at times, right? But then like as we've slowly started to like get better at our budget, like you said, Maggie, I'm like, oh, this actually works better for me and I'm more fulfilled and I'm happier than my previous state. Do you guys get that question fairly often, or that comment where people are like, oh, you must hate this?
I don't, but I think it's because people don't talk openly enough about money. And so I certainly feel like people probably think that about me, but nobody says it like to my face. But I see other people around me and I see what they're doing, the decisions they're making, and even just like what they will go do with their kids, or what the frequency of which they'll buy their kids like physical stuff and toys and things. Every time they go into Target, their kid gets something, every time. And I feel when I'm in any sort of interaction with them, or our kids are interacting or different things, I feel no, I'm telling my kids no in front of them. Right. And I feel them, and maybe it's my own internal, like Mike, I'll say to Mike sometimes, like, I still do care a little bit what other people think. I'm pretty good. I mean, Mike just does not care at all. So,
I aspire to be like Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I still have those moments where maybe no one says anything to me, but I do think someone might be secretly judging me and being like, well, why don't you buy do you not have enough money? Yeah. Do you not blah, blah, blah. And me thinking like, I have plenty of money. I'm just choosing where I spend my money. And I don't think this is something that is not important to me. It's not, I actually think I'm teaching my kids valuable lessons by not buying them something every time they want something. And so, that's a great question, Justin. No one ever says anything directly to me. I often just think they're thinking it.
That low level tension where it's just on their brain. Yeah.
I think people don't say it directly to me, but they'll say things like, well, I don't think I can do that now because it's important that I really enjoy my money. Or I don't want to keep driving my car because I want something that's going to be safer or going to last. And I'm like, dude, my car's 20 years old and it's still lasting and it's safe. Like, what the hell are you talking about? I think there's some kind of It's super safe.
I know,
it's
you're
like,
right. It's a tank.
It's
You're
like
right.
driving like an armored truck around the city. Anyway, let's move on to questions about you because we are very quickly taking over your interview to make our show.
No worries.
So going back to this experience you had with the inheritance and then spending it all down and making some lifestyle choices, I'm interested, was there a moment where you guys were like, we are going to do this differently? Or was it a phased approach where you started to make small decisions over time?
There was a moment. We were listening to the Dave Ramsey book. I don't even want to tell this story because we don't like Dave Ramsey. Disclaimer, we don't follow him anymore. But we were listening to his audiobook, The Total Money Makeover, on a road trip. And just listening to how we could do things differently really got us thinking, wow, we're doing things really, really wrong. Like, really wrong. And so that was the turning point for us that really got us thinking about our money and our habits and where the money went. And we never even talked about where the inheritance went before that. It was never even a thought.
So do you mean like as he was talking about all the things you should be doing, you were like, wow, we're not doing any of those things?
Yeah. In regards to like saving money, paying off debt,
Having a budget.
we didn't even think about being debt free. That wasn't even a thought. It was just that we knew that we probably shouldn't be using our credit cards in the way that we were using them. And that's about as deep as we thought about it. And so listening to that book was the turning point for us, really.
Although, I think, Mike, to answer your question more directly, we kind of did it in a monumentous point. So we listened to the book, and then it took us like 5 months to actually do something. Like we had a budget, but it was like on spreadsheet. We didn't really track expenses. It was just kind of like arbitrary. This is what we spend. And that lasted all the way till like November. So we listened to the book in a summer road trip, and then November comes around and we finally got things started. And the way that it got started then was I was like driving to work one day feeling like a failure because our daughter was going to be here in a month. And I was like, we both have careers. What is going on? Why are we struggling so hard? And then that night we started listening to the Dave Ramsey podcast. And it was like literally that night we downloaded his budgeting app and started a budget then. So it kind of was like this like low level start that kind of rose till we actually got things rocking and rolling. And what's really funny about it is like listening to the book, we had talked even more for like a year before that of like, we should listen to that book. We should listen to that book because she had a family member who doesn't even follow him. That was just like, hey, I've heard this is a good book. And so we were like, oh, we should listen to it. We should listen to it. So, I mean, you're talking a year and a half of us like, maybe we should do something about this. I don't know. Let's keep doing this. And so, yeah, it wasn't like a really clear like moment, I guess. It was very prolonged.
That's interesting. So were you listening to the book together?
We were, yeah, in the car, chatting through it and stuff. And I mean, there was stuff that we didn't know anything about it. So, now that we've slowly started to like learn from other folks, we learn really cool things. But I will say for like a baseline example, there were things that was like, oh, that's really good to know. Like that's what a budget looks like, or those are the things that should go in a budget, or just some of those general good money practices. So it was really cool to listen to them and talk to your partner about it right away, not have to like put the book down and catch up with them later after work.
Yeah. I love that you like listened at the same time. I've never done that with my husband, but it makes me want to do that on certain things now, like maybe on a road trip. Okay, so back to good stories. You've alluded to this a couple times, and we're talking about Dave Ramsey now anyways. So, looking back at that and kind of talk just about your experience in that journey of like, you were big on his content and what he kind of, quote, sold or literally sold. And then like, what do you think of it now and how has that changed or evolved?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. I feel like you got to take like a deep breath before you talk.
Okay. Yeah, Dave Ramsey. We were so hardcore that we followed everything to almost a T, and it was to a point where if we did anything off of his plan, I felt, and I don't even know if yours was as bad as mine, but I felt extreme shame and guilt, and like we were just screwing the whole thing up because his plan is very black and white. You do this. You don't do this. If you do anything that's not on the plan, you've done bad. And so, for example, we took some money out of his Roth. I don't recommend anyone doing that, but that's the way we kickstarted getting off of debt. We were 27. He was 27. We were like, okay, we're not even 30 yet. We can make this money back up once we get out. And it is what it is. That's what we did. But I felt so bad about that. Like, that's not taking away from your retirement. It's so bad. I just felt horrible about it. And then we did a cash out refinance to pay off our car. And I was like, oh my God, of our home. And I'm like, again, like, that's so horrible to take out of our house. And again, these things that we did were not things that I'd necessarily go and recommend someone else go and do, but they really did help us. And that's why we're here today. So we were so hardcore that the shame was like really, really intense. And then Justin started, Dave Ramsey he's kind of an asshole. He's very...
Tell us how you really feel about him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really just straightforward. And Justin and I started talking about some of the things that he was saying, and he makes jokes a lot, but then we started really talking in depth, and maybe you can go further with this, but we were like, I think he's serious. No, I know he's being serious. And then we started really backing out because the morals did not align at all.
Yeah. I think that for me, you know, he preaches so often having a second job. And so I was busting tail serving tables back at my old restaurant, like while I was still a teacher. And there'd be some like days that I would work and then like have to go, you know, teach in the morning, or I'd like fill my entire weekend with shifts. I even picked up a third job right before the pandemic that unfortunately I just didn't do because it was catering and then the pandemic happened. But I was like ready to get a third job and like get out of debt. And he like recently had a comment where he called like minimum wage workers like lazy or something like that, or like idiots. And I just kind of want to be like, hey man, like I'm investing in your product, and like you're sitting out here calling people like me lazy, even though I have 3 jobs. Like, how am I lazy? And so that like rubbed me the wrong way. And like you start to like dive deeper into like just some of his points of privilege that he like definitely rested on during this pandemic. And it, like, I don't know, we take the pandemic seriously, and there's a lot of human beings that lost their life. And by the way, thank you guys for mentioning that. Like, you guys were, your most recent episode was awesome. And I appreciate you guys highlighting that it was a difficult year for folks. But, you know, it just felt like he wasn't really like honoring all the stuff that, you know, there were people who didn't have the money to do certain things during this pandemic. It felt like he was just not really supporting them. And it seems so backwards to me because so much of that is his base.
Yeah.
Like his base is are people who are struggling. Like, why would you talk like that? It just made no sense to me. And so the more and more you hear and learn about it, the more and more you talk to others who've had experiences where they're like, yeah, it felt super gross to me too. You know, it's just like, it was just didn't feel good.
He's not the only person who's been quite successful off preaching like fairly contradictory things to their bases, right? So there's a weird history of just people. I heard someone talking about this recently. The people who somehow get like large followings and do really well are the ones who are making these big outlandish, I don't know what the word is, but claims, and they're saying contradictory things. And like, you know, for some reason, the people who are just like quietly doing the right things and not making, and just being very normal. And
well, I think one of the things that happens with people like Dave Ramsey and also Susie Orman, is that the other one?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. That name sounds familiar. Yeah.
So
she does the same thing. I mean, not the same thing as
type
him.
Of thing. And like Robert Kiyosaki or whatever does the book. One of the things that I think really happens to these people is that, you know, they've been doing this for so long and they've made so many hundreds of millions of dollars that they just like, they are so far disconnected from where they started that they just like, they no longer understand the people they're talking to.
Yeah.
And they all, I see this all the time in like headlines where they say something horribly offensive to people that I'm sure 30 years ago, they would have been like, God, I never think that. But now that they're living in their $50 million mansion and flying their private jets, they just don't understand anymore.
I don't know a lot about where they all came from too, but I do wonder, like, did they come from not very much and really build up to this, and have they forgotten it, or did they always have a lot? You know, I don't even know the history of everyone.
That's a good point, because Dave Ramsey, he did come from having a lot of money and then going bankrupt and then building it back up. But his his program is 30 years old. And so nothing has been adjusted. And he's sitting here telling people like, oh, you don't need a credit score. It's okay. Just close things out and just trash your credit. And then that's really going to hurt a lot of people when they go to try to buy a home and stuff. But we didn't think very deeply about what he was saying because we just listened. And looking back, I'm like, that's very dangerous to just listen to someone so blindly. However, I'm really glad now that we've been able to step away because we learned a lot. It's our baseline. We definitely still do certain things that he taught us, but we do it in our own way.
Yeah. And to kind of go back to your point, Mike, that was an absolute like firm cutoff. I was like laying in bed one night at 10 at night and it was just like, hey, I'm deleting his podcast. I'm not watching it anymore. I'm not listening to it. I'm not following any of his personalities on Twitter or anything like that. Like, I'm done. And it was weird because like for the first week, I was like, oh my gosh, like what do I do from like 11 to 2 o'clock when that is supposed to play on the TV? Like, it's so weird to think like that, right? But we've seen kind of those, like you said, Maggie, those icons in history, whether it's, media or even back to like religion, where we like hold them up as though they are like our gods, so to speak, and everything revolves around them. And so it was so weird for the first week because I'm like, I'm a grown man. Like, why am I doing this? Like, what is going on?
I think you too also, I'm sure you're maybe at this point now, but like when you have an experience like that, look, take the good that you learned from that and continue to carry it on in your own style. And like I don't like things that are super black and white either. And so, you learned a lot of great things and take that and just move on and say like, thanks for what you taught me, but I've now realized, we're not really aligned in our thinking and I'm going to listen to other voices and continue to move forward on my own journey. That's okay.
Yeah.
I think what's cool too is now there's other human beings on social media who can share this stuff. Like you said, it doesn't have to be this contrarian who's super like hard about stuff. It can just be somebody who's like, yeah, hey, this is kind of what I do. And if it works for you, here's a really cool Instagram graphic to make it make sense. And so we can consume all this other content that people in the 90s couldn't. It was like Dave Ramsey or nobody. But instead, we get to learn from all these other people. Like, I mean, I've learned more about my health insurance options from listening to people like you guys and other podcasts and people on Instagram than Dave Ramsey ever taught me. I've never learned about my health insurance options. So it's just interesting that we can consume other content nowadays. It definitely makes it easier.
Justin, I think that's such a great point because this is one of the reasons why we started the podcast. We were realizing just talking to your own friends about money can improve your financial situation so much. And people don't talk. It's like you have to go listen to some kind of icon that's selling, millions of dollars worth of books. You'll listen to them, but you won't listen to like your neighbor who's in a similar socioeconomic status, who has a lot in common with you, who's a real, nice, real person. And I just think there's so much just from talking to, like you said, other people that are a little bit more in your same lifestyle and in your same life stage or whatever it might be. You don't need someone like a Dave Ramsey.
Yes. You don't need someone like a Dave Ramsey.
No, not at all.
I think we should rename this episode Dave Ramsey is a Dick.
Dave
and then
Ramsey
tag
sucks.
him and then say
Wait,
how
you
many
can't
listens
say
we
that
get.
word.
I can't?
I think you might need to take that word out. You can say asshole.
Who
I
is
don't know. I
censoring
just
us,
think
Maggie?
somebody's gonna.
Do you think somebody's going to go
No,
through our podcast
honestly,
and like bleep it out?
On our distribution platform, I think that word will flag us as explicit content. Specific.
What?
I'm not sure, but I'm just guessing. I think
That
you can say
can't be
asshole, but
true.
you can't say dick. I don't know. I'll say asshole in front of my kids, but I won't say the D word. I got standards.
All right, moving on.
Okay. Anyways. Okay.
Okay, so back to
We
you
should
guys.
leave that conversation in. Okay.
You leave it, yes.
Yeah. So
Except take out the part where I said I'll say asshole in front of my kids. Sound like a terrible parent.
No,
Yeah,
you can't pick and
that's
choose,
the next
Maggie.
review,
It's
yeah.
staying in there. All right. So you guys are going through a pretty major lifestyle change and
Huge.
driven
Big.
primarily by financial decisions. So can you tell us a little bit about this and what your thought process was and how it's going?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are selling our house and paying everything off and relocating and starting over. We thought last year in January of 2020, we tried to buy a house and got denied because of the bidding war. And that was the first time we thought maybe we could sell this house, put money on the second house that we were planning to buy, and then pay everything off. But then that didn't work out. So the idea just kind of simmered and went away. And then it was this summer where we thought, okay, we could literally sell this home. We live in a very expensive area. We could sell this because we fortunately put quite a bit of money into the down payment. At least some of the 600,000 is still there. We have quite a bit of equity in the home. So we started thinking about what that could mean for us if we just like sold the homes, paid everything off, started planning and paying for our future and not everything in the past. And so that's what we're going to do. And it's a big, big decision, but primarily we're relocating. So this was never our forever home. So that makes it a little easier. And we've thought about moving to a different area for a few years, but never like too seriously. So that's part of it too. So there are a lot of things that went into this decision, but that's what we're doing.
This is a power move. We just did an episode on called Pet Peeves and Power Moves. And this is a power move. I was so proud of you guys when I heard this, because this was, I'm sure, a hard decision. I know you guys did a whole episode on it and talked about it, but it's a big move where you're making big changes that are, not difficult necessarily, but probably, emotionally just, moving away from family, making a big change in your life. But I think in the end, it will, I'm sure you're doing this because you believe it will be the right thing and bring you more happiness than what you currently have. And that, happiness doesn't come from a specific house.
Yes.
That's such a good point.
I'm very proud of you guys. I think this is a huge move. And I think just the way you, and people should go listen to this episode that you did on this, because we'll put a link in the show notes to it. But the way you very openly talked about, you started realizing that with the amount of money you were making, that you were slowly clawing out of debt, but you were just never going to be able to quickly get into a different financial situation. And I think sometimes people aren't willing to make bold moves and sacrifices to get into a better financial situation. And I think it's really cool that you guys are doing this and talking about it, because it's a power move.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I don't know if you guys, scheduled it that way or what, but it felt like your guys' home series dropped right when I needed it, because I was really struggling with the decision.
We schedule all of our episodes around what you two need. So
That's what I figured. I was like, this is great. I mean, up until a month ago, my twin brother and his wife put together a PowerPoint presentation. They had us over for dinner, and out of nowhere, their Apple TV turns on, and it's a PowerPoint as to why we should stay. And they ran numbers on the home costs there. They ran numbers on childcare and shared nanny services here. They made fun of Dave Ramsey. They were on their game and had a 30-minute presentation. And so for a solid week, I was we could sell and still rent here. My job had told me we'll keep you and hire Haley to keep you. We'll do whatever to keep the
You say that
family.
Haley's a terrible teacher, and we'll even hire Haley to keep
We'll even give her a job. No, I don't know. They couldn't tell me that they had an opening. I now know that they have another opening beyond my job, so she would have been able to get a job. But anyways, yeah. So I mean, for a month, I was Haley, we gotta stay. And it felt like we were super disconnected. And then one day I just sat down with Haley and I was dude, I'm super emotional. Just tell me if we're going to go, let's do it. I got to get this out of my mind. Cause Haley was oh, that rental could work, or and it was super blasé about stuff. And it just felt like we were disconnected. And she was yeah, dude, we're going. And I was okay, cool. This is perfect.
Yeah.
And then the week later, Mike's this is a lifestyle choice. And it's not an investment. And I'm oh yeah, this home that we overbid on and have to dump tons of money in and have to pay interest on over 30 years is not making me money. So when people are but Sonoma County is such good real estate and your money, it's yeah, but let me actually show you the numbers of what I've spent on this home and show you where the numbers are going to be in 30 years. And then let's talk about if this home is really going to be worth over $1 million.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it will be when you have put in over $1 million.
Yeah, true.
Because you're now, yeah.
But I mean, it was just why not get out of this now, get back into renting, make sure we're set up. And in our episode, we do break down that like we're going to still have such a large chunk for the next home down payment because this is the right move for us right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's good to say this is the right move for us right now. Also, I didn't realize you had a twin brother. You probably said that before and I forgot, but I love that he put together a PowerPoint to try to convince you to stay. Good for him. That's something I would do.
Yeah, they're so cool. And they're actually, since we're selling the home and I'm going to be back to in-person teaching, they're like revamping their little studio so that I can stay out there throughout the week while Haley's at the new house with our daughter and stuff. And so they're really sweet. They're bummed, but they're like, whatever is best for your family, they're excited for. And we're only moving 2.5 hours away. So like shooting up on the weekends, we can plan a visit each month and still see them.
And nothing's forever, right? This could be something for a couple years that gets you in a better situation. And, and also I think, I don't remember, I was talking to somebody about a decision. I was actually talking to Jose Hernandez that we recently interviewed. We interviewed him from the Millennial Money Mentor. And we were talking about just a big decision around leaving his job. And I was like, it's like the decision you guys are making. There's nothing that can't be undone, right? If you get there and you're 3 months in, 6 months in, 2 years in, and you're not happy, you can always make a change. And it's especially better, I think, that you're renting in this situation because it gives you some time in a, low stakes effort to decide if you want to buy there long term, if you want to move back, what you want to do. But either way, the direction you're going in is a positive financial direction for your family, which I think is a great, again, good power move.
Thank you.
Your episode about renting versus buying and all of that really stuck because we got a bid on our house $65,000 over asking price. And I was like, oh, we can buy a house next year. We're going to have all this money. And Justin was like, wait, we don't have to. Just because we're going to have enough money for a down payment, we don't have to. We can let that grow and simmer and decide if we want to be here or there or in Tennessee. We can figure out where we want to be before we buy a home. And you don't have to buy a house. Like we're renting from my mom. So the money, I don't feel so bad. Even if we were renting from some random person, it's okay.
Yeah, I think there's some weird stigmas to renting, and I don't really know why. Because for many people in many situations, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
They're perpetuated by the mortgage industry.
Well, true. Yeah, who benefits from,
All right, so to tie together a number of themes that you guys have touched on, I'd like to ask a question about your roles within the education system. So you grew up with families who didn't talk about these things. You got exposure to people who were selling you advice, some of it good, some of it bad. And now you are creators in this space. But you are also have an important role educating young people on a daily basis. So what do you think the role of primary education should be when it comes to financial acumen?
Wow, I love that. That's awesome. Do you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay, cool. So I haven't explored it enough because we've been distance learning, for a while now. But I know that there are so many good young children, early, elementary books about those financial literacy themes. And so I currently teach 5th grade, and I'm really excited to get into that realm as well, like gently touching on those themes. Obviously, that's not part of my curriculum in California, but what is part of my curriculum is all of these ELA themes about summarizing stories, comparing and contrasting. So I can bring in these books and talk about these things. And we also work in fractions and decimals, primarily in 5th grade in California. So there are so many ways for me to bring it in with decimals and money and, fractions. I mean, fractions are like everyday life. Obviously, if you can convert fractions to decimals, you're dealing with it daily. So I'm excited for that. And I think it's important because, like you said, we're not taught at a young age, and we don't need to be like the Dave Ramseys of the elementary classroom, like pushing it on to kids. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, hey, check it out, bud. Like if you keep that bag of Cheetos for today, tomorrow, I'm going to give you one more. And if you keep those 2 tomorrow, I'm going to give you 4 the next day or whatever. And you're like minimally teaching a kid compound interest. And then you just say like, hey, bud, that's compound interest. And then like a couple months later, you bring it up in a math problem. whatever that may be, there's ways to touch on it that is not overbearing, that's not disrespectful to their family situation or anything like that, but that just gives them like a little taste of it that they're going to remember. And what's cool is my brother teaches high school Spanish and English as a second language. And one of his courses is also called Meta. And it's basically like first generation college students as a study skills class. And so he got a book from one of our like Twitter friends who teaches economics in high school. He wrote like the money game plan. And it's basically how to basic teach financial literacy to high schoolers. So he got a copy of it and they read through it as a class and talked about it. And that was like the first 6 weeks of school for him. And I was like, dude, that's brilliant. Like these high school students who are first gen college students are going to need this stuff.
I'm just curious with your brother, Justin, was he influenced to do that because of the stuff you guys do and talk about, or was that something that he would have done anyways?
He wouldn't have done it anyways. And it's so funny because like I've said, we don't talk to him much anymore, but like slowly they'll like hint at things that they've done. And we're like, you guys listen to the podcast. Like you guys are listening
You're
to us a
closet
little
listeners.
bit. I don't think he would have done it without listening to us.
That again is why like talking to your friends about money is so valuable, right? And just people it's like they're afraid to tell someone what they've done or, whatever. So I just think that's really cool that he is in a position, that your brother's in a position that he's able to creatively pull in concepts about money and just, like the basics of managing your money and good financial habits. Because I do know, and I'm assuming you guys see this in your own jobs, there's a lot of limitations to what I'm sure you guys in teaching like specific grades are actually able to bring into the curriculum. It's pretty standard curriculum. And it's not like you can kind of just say, I'm going to start teaching personal finance to my 5th graders tomorrow.
It kind of depends on your district, your administrators, and the curriculum that they're using. I have always been fortunate enough to work in places where I can kind of do whatever I want as long as it aligns with the standards. If I can find a way to say that there's a standard in this, then I'm usually free to go. So I think to really answer Mike's question, we need to have it in the curriculum because teachers who are uneducated about the financial literacy realm aren't going to know how to bring it in. I can easily bring it into math problems, but it needs to be like ingrained in the textbook and the curriculum, and teachers need to have, I feel like it should be part of our teacher prep program teaching about that because
that's really interesting. I didn't think of that. You're right, because we're teachers who understand this, but what about the teachers out there who don't?
You're right. How are you expected to teach something that you've never been taught yourself?
Right.
That's really interesting. I didn't think you're so brilliant.
See, I'm not the dumb
I feel like you guys are having a moment. We're going to leave you alone.
No, I think they just developed a new side hustle, a new teaching platform
teaching
for
teachers.
teachers.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I love that. If there's any teachers listening to this and you steal our idea, I'm coming for you.
Formally, you've got a patent on it already. Don't worry.
Perfect. There you go.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, it is such an interesting topic. And again, it's why I know I've said this like 10 times even on this episode, but it's why talking to friends, and we consider you two friends, about money is so valuable. And so we really just appreciate you guys coming on the show because I think these conversations are what helps someone else. Somebody else hears it and it inspires them to make a change in their life or to realize, to validate what they're already doing or to, change something and push them towards a better financial situation and more happiness, which is ultimately the goal. So we really appreciate your time talking and just being very open and kind of sharing your stories and what you've where you've had mistakes and trip ups and where you've learned from them and where you're going from there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I was looking forward to this one. That sounds bad. Like I don't look forward to all of them, but you know what I mean.
No, I know what you mean. Mike and I always joke that our days are better when we start it with a fun podcast discussion. So
awesome.
All right, Haley and Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure. And hopefully we'll talk to you guys soon.
Love it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.